tea with breakfast. Proudly brought to you by Ryman Healthcare, the measure of retirement living.
At Highway 1 at the top of the South Island between Blenheim and Picton. We've been there live a couple of times already. The cause of the crash has yet to be officially established, but those 7 deaths take our road toll for the year to date to its highest level at exactly this stage in years. Each death is a human tragedy. The man sitting beside me has just been talking about that. And given the government's Road to Zero 2050 safety campaign, that's not where we want to be, right? We're really grateful to be joined in the studio this morning by safety campaigner and editor of dogandlemon.com Car Buyer's Guide, Clive Matthew-Wilson. Thanks for coming in, Clive. I really appreciate it. You talked when you came here about attending a fatal like that, the 7 lives lost. Lest we forget, these are human lives, right? So before we segue out into the big picture, let's look at the micro. And the micro is just tragic, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing worse than attending after a fatal accident. I have several times. And it's just awful. These are bodies splattered all over the road and lives shattered, and it will affect generations.
Okay, so we have this Road to Zero 2050 campaign, which I think everyone watching will say it's a good objective, right? It's a good campaign. And the fewer deaths we have on our roads, the better it is. But I was looking at the year to date. And in fact, if you add these 7 deaths to the total, we're at the highest level for this stage of the year than we've been in years. What's going wrong, Clive?
Well, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. The government is fixated with speed, when actually 15% of the road toll involves speed, and it's one tiny group of yobbos, reckless motorcyclists and blotto drivers who cause almost all speed-related accidents, and yet the government is telling us that if they give us a ticket for going 1k over the speed limit, it's going to stop accidents like this. There is one thing that would have stopped that accident yesterday as a median barrier. The Auckland Harbour Bridge used to have 1 serious crash a week, and they tried all this bullshit. Time and time again, we're going to be out in force this Friday, please drive safely. It didn't work, it never works. In the end, they had an attack of sanity. They installed a median barrier on the Auckland Harbour Bridge, and the serious accidents stopped overnight and basically never came back. What does that tell you?
What this also tells me is the experience of driving on State Highway 1 in this country. There is no margin for error, and it's a long time since I've driven between Picton and Blenheim. Unfortunately, I love that part of the world. But I'm thinking of, say, Tokeroa to Taupo in the centre of the North Island. I hate driving that State Highway 1 stretch because if anything goes wrong and you are heading towards a truck, you're dead, aren't you?
Yeah. And the 20% of the road toll involves trucks. That's not an attack on truck drivers, who are generally wonderful blokes. But there's an entire industry basically sponsored by the government, because most of the cost of building our highways, and the reason they're so expensive, is that because they need to be set up for trucks. But trucks only pay about a quarter of the cost. It's a taxpayer handout, and that means the money doesn't go to rail, which is an environmentally far better way of moving goods, and that truck might not have been on the road yesterday when those people drifted it across the road.
So what do we have to do?
It's very...
Sorry, no, you're going to say it's very simple.
It's very simple. The asking people to drive safely is an expensive waste of time. 50 years of research shows that. So the solutions are all technological. If a median barrier had been on that road yesterday, there would have been no collision. If the van that the people were driving in had had a lane change warning, it's just an electronic device, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation now. If it had had fatigue alert, which is a common feature on cars now, my guess is they fell asleep at the wheel. You know, and everybody's done that, but the New Zealand roads are like a staircase without a handrail. You make a mistake, you're going to get hurt. And the fact of the matter is that while the government's fluffed around for years and years...
Successive governments, right?
Successive governments.
I don't know how long I've been interviewing you for, Clive, but you've been saying this for as long as I've been talking to you, and that's many years.
Yeah, we don't need grand highway projects. We need to fix up the roads we've got. We need to move freight off out of trucks and onto rail, where it's many, many times safer, and we need to make sure that whatever enforcement measures we're doing are effective and immediate.
So if we go back to this Road to Zero 2050, and you and I both agree, everyone will agree that that is a worthy objective, but in the context of a country in which State Highway 1 is dual, and there are very few median barriers, and there are long, long stretches of the road without passing lanes, have we got any reasonable hope of achieving zero by 2050?
No, not unless we have a complete change of attitude. There are a few things that you can do that I have been saying for 20 years plus. If all cars in the daytime have daytime running lights on, that is the lights that are designed to be seen rather than to illuminate the road, we could be reducing the daytime road toll by as much as 20%.
Is that speculation, or is that based on?
That's what all the facts shows, and the government has the same facts as me. They are fixated with speed. They are fixated with lowering the speed of cars when the people that cause speed-related accidents don't read speed signs. They're fixated with lowering the speed of the average driver when the average driver is not the problem, and they simply ignore technology that would lower the road tolls, starting with median barriers. You look at Jacinda Ardern's promise to embrace median barriers. How many have been built? Why don't you ask her?
The problem with median barriers, I guess, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here on behalf of why you would want to not have them on dual carriageways, and that is if you are stuck in a long line of traffic and you need to overtake, so you're behind somebody towing a caravan who's going 73, right? A median barrier is going to prevent you from doing that. Is that an issue with median barriers?
Of course it's an issue, and that's a price we may have to pay. But above all else, you know, the government has a sort of 19th century approach to installing median barriers. In other words, they'll look at a tiny stretch of road, and then they'll put engineers in there, and they'll have lots of cups of tea over it, and evaluations and negotiations to buy a bit of extra land off the farmer next door, and meanwhile people die. They could have look how they can spend, the government can find 55 million to plan a cycle lane across the Auckland harbour. But they can't find the money to install simple median barriers down the majority of our highways.
So is there any realistic prospect of us getting the road toll down in a meaningful way? And I am staggered to see it is so high relative to previous years at this stage of the year. If we're heading theoretically to Road to Zero 2050, have we got any prospect of getting there?
Not if they follow this path. The median barriers would have saved 7 lives yesterday.
What about the cost of putting them in nationwide?
They're very expensive because of the way they do them, but compared to the cost of building a new highway, they're peanuts.
Clive Matthew-Wilson, tell us about your website, dogandlemon.com. We really appreciate you. Clive, I do want to say, you've been saying this to me, I don't know how long you and I have been talking off and on. Must be the best part of a couple of decades.
Yeah.
You've been saying this for a long time.
Yeah, and it's not a game to be in if you have a short-term view.
Clive Matthew-Wilson, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And our hearts go out to everyone who is connected in any way to this tragic, tragic crash.